My husband always said the farm was just old land that wasn't worth seeing. The strange part was that he visited it every Thursday without fail. When he died, the lawyer handed me a ring of keys I had never seen before. One key carried a faded brass tag stamped with only one word: barn. For 34 years of marriage, I had never been inside that farm. I told myself it was because he wanted one place that belonged only to him. After all, everyone deserves privacy, didn't they? The gravel road wound through neglected fields until the farmhouse finally appeared. Nothing looked valuable. The porch sagged. Paint peeled from every wall. The mailbox leaned sideways as though nobody had touched it for years. Yet fresh tire tracks crossed the muddy driveway. Someone had been here recently. I unlocked the front door. Inside, everything was spotless. The kitchen counters gleamed. A kettle sat beside the stove. Fresh bread rested beneath a clean towel. Someone had baked only hours earlier. I froze. Who had been living here? I searched room after room. No family photographs, no personal clothes. Only careful order, as if someone cleaned away every trace before leaving. Then I noticed muddy children's boots beside the back door. My heart skipped. Children? Harold and I never had children. At least, none that I knew about. The obvious answer slammed into me before I could stop it. He had another family every Thursday. For decades. Suddenly, every late meeting, every quiet excuse, every missing afternoon fit together perfectly. I wanted to leave. Instead, I followed the path toward the old barn. The brass key fit the lock. Inside stood a row of wooden stalls. Empty. Except for one locked office hidden at the back. Someone had scratched fresh marks across the floor leading straight toward its door. Then I heard footsteps outside. Someone else had arrived. The footsteps stopped outside the office. An elderly woman called softly, "Harold?" My breath caught. I opened the door instead. She stared at me with the same shock I felt. I'm his wife," I whispered. Tears instantly filled her eyes. "So you finally came." Those words hurt more than anger ever could. Her name was Ruth. She refused to answer my questions until we sat inside the farmhouse. Instead, she handed me a weathered notebook. Every page listed dates. Thursday after Thursday, medical appointments, prescription refills, school meetings, repair bills. Every expense carefully recorded. At first, I thought the notebook proved Harold had secretly supported another household. Then I noticed every entry ended with initials, not names. Different initials. Dozens of them. Who were they? Ruth finally spoke. People believed this farm belonged to Harold. It never truly belonged to him. That made no sense. County tax records listed his name. The deed had always been his. She opened a cabinet. Inside sat hundreds of envelopes. Every envelope carried a different return address. Different towns. Different families. Different years. None had ever been mailed. Before I could ask why, Ruth quietly said something that destroyed my first assumption. I was never his lover. Then who was she? And why had Harold hidden all of this from me? Ruth unlocked the office inside the barn. Shelves reached the ceiling. Each held labeled boxes. Inside every box were photographs. School certificates, hospital forms, birthday cards, tiny handmade drawings. Each belonged to a different child. None shared the same last name. I stared in disbelief. Harold had never mentioned any of them. Ruth finally explained. 28 years earlier, a factory closure had devastated nearby farming communities. Families quietly lost everything. Some slept in cars. Others hid from neighbors out of shame. Harold couldn't save everyone. So he used the farm, not as a home, as a place where struggling parents could recover without publicity. They grew vegetables together, shared equipment, stored livestock, helped each other until they could stand again. No newspapers, no charity signs, no public recognition, only dignity. The children's boots I found belonged to families rebuilding their lives. The spotless farmhouse stayed ready because new families arrived whenever another left. The unopened envelopes suddenly made sense. They were thank you letters. Harold never opened them. Ruth smiled sadly. He always said kindness should never become a trophy. Then she handed me one final item, a sealed folder bearing my name. I had never seen it before. My hands trembled as I opened the folder. Inside wasn't a confession. It was a plan. Harold had spent years arranging legal protection for the farm after his death. He worried I would discover the place without understanding it. If I chose to sell it, every family depending on it would lose a quiet refuge. If I chose to keep it, the trust would transfer to me. There was one final note. Not dramatic, just honest. I kept this from you because I feared you would spend every dollar we had helping others beside me. You deserved peace, not another burden. If you're reading this, decide for yourself whether kindness should continue. For days, I walked the property alone. I met families repairing fences, children collecting eggs, parents sharing meals after impossible years. Nobody treated Harold like a hero. They remembered him as the man who simply showed up every Thursday. Eventually, they began asking me questions instead. Not about money, about whether the farm would stay open. I realized the secret had never been about hiding people from me. It had been about protecting people from shame. Harold believed receiving help should never cost someone their dignity. I signed the trust papers. Then I added one rule of my own. Every family who eventually left the farm could return, someday as volunteers if they wished. Months later, the old mailbox no longer leaned sideways. Fresh flowers appeared on the porch. The children's boots multiplied. Laughter drifted across the fields where silence once lived. People still thanked Harold, but they did it by helping the next family. Sometimes I still wish he had trusted me with the truth. Then I remember something Ruth told me. His greatest harvest was never the land. It was hope planted quietly in other people's lives. Now every Thursday, I drive to the farm myself. Not because it's my duty, because it's finally our story.